here, right.
All right, today is March 17th, 2025. Time is 5:30 p.m. and we will open this council special work session. So we're here talking about the governing policies. It looks like Ashley provided us documentation for the current governing policies. And then any legal recommendations for the revisions.
Yep. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, evening. I'm Ashley Wygod, presenting from the city attorney's office. Peter Hicks was going to be here from Jordan Ramus, and unfortunately he had a conflict that came up and apologizes. He wasn't going to be here, so you're left with me, and I'll be presenting the information and helping to lead the discussion. So the city of St. Helens has a governing policy, and that has been adopted, and really in local government, this is also called a form of government. So a city's form of government helps to address a city's organizational structure. It describes the respective roles of the city councilors and the mayor, and also delegating administrative authority to the city administrator or a city manager. And all cities have different forms of government. City of St. Helens has either a weak mayor or a form of government that is called a council manager form of government. So I checked with the League of Oregon Cities to get some more information, just to provide you background of what other cities do. And in this case, most cities with populations of above 2,500 have a council manager form of government. In the council manager form of government, the council retains the decision-making authority of the city, but the charter creates an office of city manager or city administrator. The appointed city administrator takes charge of the daily supervision of the city's operations and serves at the pleasure of city council. The council sets the policy and the manager carries it out, or the administrator. This type of form works best when the council exercises its responsibility for policy leadership and respects the manager's leadership roles and responsibilities of the administration. At least that's according to the League of Oregon Cities, and the majority of cities with more than 2,500 have that form. The city of St. Helens has adopted a governing policy. The city of St. Helens's charter has a council manager form where there's city council, and then it does delegate responsibilities to the city administrator. And then there's a governing policy, and that's what we're talking about today. And that has a slight variation on the council manager form, because it creates different responsibilities for hiring, firing, supervision, and termination than a typical council manager form of government. And so we put together this document that talks about, on the left side is what the city of St. Helens' current governing policy is. And on the right side are recommendations to bring the city of St. Helens governing policy more into alignment with what other cities have done, and which also seems to be relatively successful for the administration of the city. I will say that the city of St. Helens right now has Labor and Employment Counsel Aiken Blitz. It's been helping them for a long time. And he and I discussed different approaches to amending the governing policy. And he has separately provided some recommendations. He and I have not been able to merge our recommendations, but in looking at them, they actually seem pretty similar. And so we talked about, if after I present this information, if the council wants, I can talk with Aiken Blitz, is the Labor and Employment Counsel, and we can either merge our recommendations or present them to you so you can consider these recommendations, because we haven't had a chance to do that yet. But I will say, in looking at some of his recommendations, they seem very similar. in reaching out to the League of Oregon Cities, the general counsel there said that, you know, it's very common for cities to go through a process of reviewing their charter and their forms of government every once in a while if they're getting into sticking points or they're thinking like things are not working or they just have questions. So she just gave me some background information. You know, the city of Beaverton just went through a change from a strong mayor government to a council manager form of government. Cascade Locks in Toledo both updated their Cascade Locks Toledo and the city of Rogue River just updated their forms of government also with just different revisions. So it's just something that's very common to do every once in a while. And the fact that the city's looking at this now is just in line with what cities do from time to time. So the form of government that is in the city of St. Helens's charter is a council manager form of government. But right now, and a council manager form of government, the council appoints the manager, and then the manager typically appoints and hires and fires the city workforce and has discretion to do that. And if there are issues related to the team that the city manager builds, then those issues the city council would address with the city administrator or manager, rather than city council being involved in addressing issues with the team itself.
Are you talking about disciplinary action?
Disciplinary action, you know, reviews, disciplinary action, hiring and firing.
Are you talking about staff or are you talking about department heads?
Staff and department heads. So apologize if I'm not being clear. Maybe what would be helpful is to talk right now about the city's current policy, or maybe I'll restate. Maybe it'd be helpful to talk about the city's current governing policy, and then we could talk about recommendations and where those, why those recommendations are made. Does that work? Okay. So under the city's current governing policy, city council hires the city administrator. I'm on the top row. On the left-hand column, the city council hires the city administrator. The city council hires the department heads. And then there's a collaborative process of council liaison, city administrator, and department heads hiring department employees, or if they can't agree, they refer that to the city council. Under a traditional form of council manager form of government, the city council hires the administrator, but the city administrator selects the department heads and the employees for hiring. We recommend that because it's in line with what other cities are doing, and it also it allows the city administrator to operate the city and build his team, and then also have accountability because he's making the selections of the people that are going to be supporting the administration. We have heard that an option where for department head hiring, for the city administrator to hire or present to city council to hire a department head. The city administrator would select a department head for hire, but then that hire would be confirmed by the city council. And when the city council is presented that information, if they do not agree with that selection, they would tell the city manager, city administrator to go back and reselect.
How is that any different than what we have really in place then? If we are doing the council hires department heads, if you follow the breadcrumbs on that one, the city administrator selects the department head for hire, but to be confirmed by city council, you're really ending up in the same exact result.
I think that, what, say again?
Not necessarily.
Well, they have to be confirmed.
They have to be confirmed. And I think that there's a difference in process where you're allowing your city administrator, who you have delegated authority to build its team and to do his job, to go through the selection process. And then the city administrator would present that information to council. And if council did not agree with that selection for some reason, they could then deny it and go back. But it's different than having city council be involved in the process and in the selection and in the evaluation, because that could come up with a totally different candidate that would then be presented to the city council. The concept is that, you know, you've put your faith in the city administrator to do his position, and then he's building his team to implement the city council's policy. So there is a difference, and I guess what I would say is, I think there is a difference. And I don't actually, I'm not aware of other cities that actually have that confirmation process. But what I heard in prior meetings was that maybe city council and this city council would be interested in that process because you're still involved in the hiring. So which department heads are being hired, that you're not completely relinquishing all control. And you make sure that the city administrator, city manager knows that their selection is under review and there's accountability for that selection. So that I would say is the difference. So right now, city council hires a department head. I would say that the most of the cities actually have the city administrator hire the department heads. So that's another option. I don't know if that's the option that you want, but saying that's another option. I don't know, but I believe, for example, that the other Labor and Employment Council would probably recommend that option, and it is more in line with majority of other cities. That being said, there's exceptions can be made and there can be variances on what other cities do.
Or we could stay with the same, considering it's been this way for a long period of time here. That's not an option.
And that is an option also, yes. And so, I think, we could, if anybody wants to keep talking, I can move through this and then we could go back and have different discussions on the other topics. I think supervision and discipline. Right now, as we're looking on the left-hand side, city council supervises and disciplines the city administrator. There's no change proposed to that. The city administrator supervises and disciplines department heads. That's under the current policy and there's no change proposed there. Department heads supervise and discipline department employees. There's no change there, except for we would recommend adding that there's input from the city administrator as needed. Right now, department head, the city administrator is not involved at all, at least not on paper, with the department head supervising and disciplining of employees. So that's just a proposed clarification. I don't know if in practice the city administrator is involved in that, but. Then moving on to termination. The current policy, city council terminates the city administrator. There's no change being recommended there. City council terminates department heads. And in this case, it's being proposed that actually the city administrator should be involved in that process and that city council should not be the body that is involved in the termination process for department heads. There's a number of reasons for that. One reason is that oftentimes terminations can be messy. They can lead to employment actions and other issues like that. And that's not really a place that city councilors, that we think city councilors would want to be involved in employment action. You could be called as a witness. You'd be involved in, all sorts of matters that typically is not the role of a city councilor. And that's why we're recommending that city councilors not be involved in that process.
Up to including lawsuits, correct?
So again?
Up to and including lawsuits.
Yes.
And that minimizes the risk if we go with the city administrator doing it.
Yes. Let's see. And then for termination, there's a collaborative process of council liaison for the city administrator and the department head terminating employees, or if they can't agree, refer to council. Right. So right now there's a collaborative process for termination, and we're recommending that department heads terminate department employees. And open to having city administrator involvement in that. In that option.
In a lot of those cases, there would be, if they're disputed, it's gonna go through the bargaining process, and I'm the appeal person too.
Okay.
Making determination, so it's appropriate for me not to be too close to those
Okay.
decision points.
So then moving on to performance evaluations, the city council evaluates the city administrator. You know, we had made a recommendation of annually because that's something that is common practice. Whether or not, you know, the extent of those evaluations that occur, those are the extent and the type of evaluation, and that process is something that can be discussed and evaluated, and the city council can direct the city administrator, or the city council can, you know, determine how they want to do these evaluations and also how they want the city administrator to do these evaluations. If there's a preference, maybe it's, you know, extensive for 1 year and then, you know, subsequent years is some less extensive evaluation and then extensive another year, something for, if there's an effort to save on resources and not be as resource intensive. But it's just our opinion that having annual evaluations is really helpful. In other cities, in checking with the League of Oregon Cities, they said that annual evaluations is something that is very common, that most cities employ with their city administrator and also with department heads. Right now, for performance evaluations, the council liaison and the city administrator evaluate the department head. We're not recommending any change to that. We see this as different than having the full council involved. It's more of just the council liaison is involved in this process. But right, it's something that has been done. I will say that in larger cities, generally, a council liaison is not necessarily involved in the department head review. And last, department employees are evaluated by supervisors, subject to review and approvals by department head. We don't see any need to change that. Just recommending that it be done annually to help have a regular and routine evaluation process, because that seems to improve functioning and communication between staff and department heads, and also department heads and city administrator and the city administrator. And it gives an performance evaluations. It's you probably know more than me, but they give opportunities also for feedback, for communication. Here are the goals that we had established. These goals are either being met or they're not being met. Here are the things that we would like to see improvement on. And while some people might have regular check-in meetings, having this formal evaluation process is something that cities, League of Oregon Cities has recommended to kind of formalize this process and make sure that the lines of communication stay open. So that's kind of the end of my presentation about governing policy, and just, I think I'm happy to try to answer any questions or also open up to discussion.
So the legal recommendations that you and your firm are making are also in line with the League of Oregon Cities recommendations, right?
I don't know if the League of Oregon Cities has made recommendations, but right, and just in terms of
It's like best practice.
best practice, it seems to be when I talked with them and met with them, and also just they sent some literature on what other cities were doing. Yes. For hiring department heads, I actually have not seen where a department head is confirmed by city council. I could probably find a city that does that. I'd say in the most arenas, the city administrator also hires department.
So exclusively, they have exclusive rights, so to speak, to hire and fire who they see fit. But in this case, we'd be given the option to confirm or deny and send it back to the drawing.
Yep.
Or interview like we did for the library director. We were hands-on for the whole process of that.
I would like this idea better, this sport better.
I like the interview for the department heads.
I don't think under either format, the council could still be involved in the interview process. Liaisons for sure. And it's whether or not it's a public meeting.
Previously, though, we were selecting.
You were selecting, yes.
We were selecting.
If you recall, one of those recent selections, I was saying, please no, I might have a challenge working with this person, and he went back out. We got another department head and it worked out really well, so.
Can we list real quick who's considered a department head? So we've got public works, we've got library director, financial director. What else is
Not
considered?
even the finance director, actually, it's the four, it's public works, police, library and admin. All right. Forget anybody?
Right,
Am I forgetting anybody?
we have 5 departments.
Five departments, yeah. I'd say five.
Police, library, public works. Admin, there's one more.
Community development, which John is over that.
That's right, at the dual role.
You're the guy.
So you're the director of two of
Yeah.
those.
So charter revisions require voters approval. But governing policy, this is something that we can do on a council level.
Yes, so when I read the charter, it seems to very generally describe a council manager form of government. And this governing policy, I don't know the history of how it got put in place, but it is a bit of a departure from the charter. In terms of the charter kind of sets up city council as the policy head and then delegating authority to the city administrator. And then this kind of re-involves city council in the hiring, firing of department heads. And so it's a little bit of an anomaly. And so that changing this does not require a change to the charter. It would just require a resolution. Resolution for approval.
Been in the weeds a little too much.
That's, yes, that's a good way of saying
I
it.
kind of felt that way. I did see reference when I was doing some little research on that same thing you mentioned, that saying council could kind of have the final say, but I didn't see any actual examples of where that's happening, but I did see on a LLC resource that most cities, the council is involved in hiring 2 positions directly, the city administrator and the city attorney. It says very few cases they're involved with hiring the police chief. But usually it's city attorney and city administrator that the council is involved with, and most other cases. Trust John's. That's what we pay him for.
I mean, that's big picture, council manager forms of government attempt to create that separation between policy making and administration. The policymakers do policy, administrations carry out the council's wishes, and that's recognized as the preferred form of government across the country. There's statistics that show they have better credit ratings or less claims. A lot of really compelling reasons to move in that direction. And I think, this policy was created from that. We want to be like Portland and be a commission and have hands-on duties. And there's you go back and look at previous revisions of this, it used to be a lot more intensive. The councilors were actually wanted to get paid to go to meetings. And so they were just going to
It's changed too.
Portland is not recognized as one of the, Portland has changed into this.
It's not functional.
It's recognized as the
Probably for
most,
many other reasons.
most dysfunctional. Yeah.
I don't think that we should be involved with disciplinary action or termination. Like, I don't think that we should have a part in that, because I don't think we should get wrapped up in unlawful employment suit claims, which we would be if we participated in those things. So I'm not in favor of us participating in those actions, or for me personally, I would not want to be involved in those.
Honestly, yeah, sorry.
But we wouldn't be.
I was just gonna say, yeah, so that's what she's saying. I think I would agree with that. And initially I was thinking, being a part of the interview process for department heads it's worked fine in the years that I've been here, which is, going on 5 years now. So it's been fine in the experiences that we've had, but I'm fine with changing that if we want to. But for me, the biggest issue that I have with this that I feel like needs focus from the council is performance evaluations. They haven't been happening. I was the police liaison and I never once was a part of any evaluation of the chief.
We can implement that. That's not, I don't think that's.
That's going to be the biggest thing for me, is implementing that. And I think I would like to see 360 reviews still, because I think that is a good way to get people that are down here doing the groundworks input about someone at the top. That's how you do a first full circle
And
review.
that's how we do that, by implementing.
I know, the CCMH does that and it works great.
I did have a great conversation this afternoon with Tamara Russell. She's the Deputy General Counsel for CIS and I wanted to talk to her about Department D 360s. And because it gets, we obviously have a morale issue in the city. And this is one way to identify opportunities to improve. She was actually, the way I presented it was very much in support of it, which was doing a 360 and having the information sent to our attorney, like we had talked about before with Peter, that does a comprehensive just overview of that information on 360, because it doesn't, first of all, it eliminates anonymous surveys, because if there's something that comes up, the city should know. The second part of it is if in fact, then no names are tied to it either, right? So it's just a comprehensive report, and she was very much in support of that dynamic. She was not in support of anonymous surveys, and she was not in support of just doing a standard necessarily 360 without having a go-to lawyer and doing a comprehensive, like just summary evaluation on that. So that was a very enlightening conversation with her today.
So are you saying that the responses would go to the attorney with the names attached?
Correct.
And then he would separate the names from the responses?
Correct.
That there's an issue to be addressed that way.
Correct. And that would be a comprehensive piece. Back to the council, I do like, I have serious issues right now going on with hiring issues. So that is a concern of mine currently as we sit here today. But I also I don't mind the city administrator selecting department heads, although I have serious concerns right now. But I do like the opportunity to be confirmed by council. I think that is, something that if it's here, has been done, that still keeps us in the I guess it somewhat in the playing field, for lack of better terms.
Said either way on the hiring, I kind of like the idea too of kind of having the final opinion, but trusting John to conduct the process and do the interviews. And
we just have one presented to us, then only one. We have the top three.
Well, can't we choose it? It's our governing policy. We could say the top three. We can do whatever we want.
He's gonna bring one to us and say, here, I want to give him a job.
I would say that the process envisions John selecting and presenting to you, just like I'm just thinking of legislative, here is the appointed attorney general and it gets confirmed by the Senate. So John makes a selection of one candidate and presents that one candidate to you. If that one candidate is not satisfactory, it gets rejected. He or she gets rejected, and John goes back and
Essentially, he's doing all the leg work for the pre-hiring process.
I see John rubbing his forehead.
We could be so lucky to have several well-qualified applicants in this market right now. It's just really challenging to get highly qualified people.
I'm fine with that model. The thing, like you said, I definitely want us out of the discipline and determination. As somebody who's been drawn into that, it's no fun. And so I would like to be as far from that as possible.
Well, a lot of this, based on council's trust with the administrator, and I think we have to trust that he's going to do the right thing. And I think
Yeah, I think John is a collaborative, that's his style, is collaborative anyway, so I can't see him not, asking if anyone from the council would like to be a part of it. I feel like that would probably be his direction anyways, but.
Well, I'm looking at some foreshadowing of current situations, and right now I don't have trust. So that's where I'm at.
Share that there's just given my style that I tend to be collaborative and share information that you would know if there was a department head that was on a path. So
Well, what about a discussion around the 360s and the performance evaluations? How does everyone feel about that?
I think maybe for the purpose of all, I purpose of this discussion, just the concept of having them and the frequency of them is what is the detail that would be included in the governing policy. I think you wouldn't want to necessarily put specific information about the type of performance reviews or the descriptions about them, because those things change and best practices change, or maybe departments even would have different types of reviews depending on the department. So not to say that you wouldn't have a discussion, but as far as the policy goes, you'd want to leave it really general so that just the obligation is to have the performance review and who conducts the performance review.
So how would we?
But I don't like the way that it's ordered like this, only because I think it's a top-down approach and not a full circle approach. So if we were gonna do a general statement, it would just be like, all staff will be evaluated annually. That's the way, if we were gonna do a general statement, that I would be comfortable with, because I don't like that top-down approach. I don't think it's effective.
My concern is if we do not specify, then I mean, we obviously have not done evaluations, right? And my concern is if we don't specify how it's going to be done, then where's the guarantee that it's going to be done where council would like it to be? If we don't actually specify that.
So what,
Can we specify those annually?
Well, and creating the governing policy is different than enforcing the governing policy as well.
Yeah, but
So
that's the thing.
those are two different
Yeah, but-
conversations.
But if we're gonna say performance evaluations, but we're gonna leave it vague and ambiguous, which is what this is, extremely vague and ambiguous, then where does it come into play that we are now then specifying what criterion is part of the performance evaluation, being the 360 evaluations? If we're not saying it.
so I guess what I would envision also is, the city council evaluates the city administrator. And it creates expectations in somewhere, and that could be in the form of a employment agreement, or if there are personnel policies, I'm not familiar with city administrators, express obligation or responsibilities. But when the city council evaluates the city administrator, that would be the time where you would have your line items and your rows for performed evaluations of all department heads. And then that would be where that would be reviewed. And so it'd be the council's responsibility to schedule and to complete performance evaluations of the city administrator to be able to then get that accountability. As far as the specification of the type of performance evaluation for the city administrator, city council has full discretion to design and evaluate and provide that. I would envision, I'd have to look and see how other cities do this, but I can imagine a council document that says, here's how performance evaluations are going to be conducted throughout the city. And that'd be a resolution that would be could be approved by city council. It could be something that is in your personnel policies. I don't know if right now the personnel policies specify how performance evaluations are performed, but that's something that, you could direct the city administrator to do, present how the city administrator is how you're going to evaluate department heads in the process. And so that's where I would envision, and I can come back with more detail about where that information gets specified, as opposed to having it in this document, because this is kind of more of the.
This looks like a 30,000 foot view. This is not the minutia that we need to be like hammering on. Like this, I mean, it's obviously needed, but I mean, we haven't been doing evaluations, right? We haven't been doing any of those things.
So at that point, then we need to set what we're gonna do with the evaluations and how we want the evaluations to take place.
Yep.
So that doesn't seem like that's that big a stretch. to me.
And then where do we address also putting contract? So contract for department heads, contract for the city administrator, where does that come into play?
I guess maybe before we talk about impacts, I just want to ask John, what are your thoughts on where the descriptions and the detail, if council has some desires for how they want to see performance evaluations performed, where do you think?
So there's some industry best practices. ICMA has booklets on how to review the city manager or administrators, fairly synonymous. I have one on my desk. I keep a folder of job descriptions I like, or evaluations that I like from other managers who are floating around on listservs and things. And I know Kathy we're working on overhauling Or tired. You know, we've been using the same form for a decade, probably at least. And it's long and it's too long. That's what gets some a disincentive to really go through it all. Really repetitive.
So maybe would I, just hearing that information, I'd like to do just a little bit of research about where that lives, where that type of detail lives about specification on performance evaluations for organizations and for local government. Because it can live somewhere with detailed specifications about how you want this done.
When you are referring to other cities that have implemented things like this, do they usually have an HR personnel? That's part of our problem, is we don't really have someone assigned to take care of HR related issues.
Agree with you wholeheartedly.
I'm just curious if other cities that are implementing these things have that lined up.
I have heard anecdotally that a city of St. Helens size does have a HR department, a designated HR department director. I know that I think Kathy maybe does a lot of HR work
Yeah.
for the city and is doing a great job implementing, HR functions, but I think that's something the city could take a look at too. Resources, and do you want to do that? But an HR person would help to organize that information and to
And these
implement.
evaluations and making sure that they're put somewhere where we're following protocols and making sure things are being checked on like they should be.
Yeah, and they could contact city council and say it's time for city administrator's
Yes.
annual review. Here's the process. Or they could coordinate a presentation with, I know the League of Oregon Cities and CIS have offered to present to City of St. Helens. They have local government presentations about performing city manager, city administrator reviews, what to do, what not to do, how to make them effective, how to make them ineffective, And so, and while I know that you're each in your own industry and have, may have lots of experience, having that local government perspective can help guide the city.
I think Tamara Russell is actually the one going to be doing the training from what she told me today. So she's going to be doing our
Have
evaluation.
someone already scheduled.
Yeah, it's Tamara Russell. And she said that she was coming out to do the evaluation training, because you can't just do performance evaluations if you've never been trained on how to do it effectively, right? Because it's difficult to do a good one, an effective one on constructive feedback. And, that's hard for a lot of people to do. So she's coming to do that. But, when we start talking about evaluations, we're going to have this training, but also what all is that going to entail if we don't have a detailed, list of what we are expecting for our evaluations.
Yes,
And
and
that's what I talked to her about it today as well.
And then that's kind of a segue, I guess, to the contracts. Oftentimes, I guess it depends on who you ask, but that an employment contract sets out expectations for the department head or for the city administrator. And then those expectations are what are used in your performance evaluation. Because those are the the responsibilities that person, the personnel is using to do their job. And if the city council comes in and says, this department head never did A, B, and C, and then as we're putting together the evaluation, you look and like, well, it's not even in their employment contract to do that. Then, you know that while you may be frustrated and you want to include those responsibilities in their job, those are not things that you would evaluate them about.
How many contracts we have with the different employees, the heads are on?
So in my understanding is that the city does not have any employment contracts with any
I don't think
department
we've been
heads
doing
or
that.
with the city administrator. That there is an at-will employment, but there are no employment contracts. And I guess what I would say is that typically, I actually, in doing a survey with the League of Oregon Cities, there wasn't another city that didn't have an employment contract with its city administrator.
It's the industry standard. We've just been back here in St. Helens.
Or specifically for the city administrator or for all departments.
For the city administrator, actually, I have done kind of an informal survey, and then department heads, there is less, it's less often that there are employment agreements with department heads, except in talking with Aiken Blitz, who's your labor and employment counsel, and who has extensive experience with police and fire departments, he says that it's very common for the police and the fire chiefs to have employment agreements. And I have seen that more and more frequently, that for those specific department heads, there are employment agreements, but not necessarily for your public works director or things like that. They would fall under the employment personnel.
It just makes it easier if there is something going on that there needs to be a separation. It's much easier to do so with the contract in place. It just is. So it seems like all our department heads should have contracts.
Yeah, some city managers have employment agreements with their department heads. So it's a
The city can't, it's with the city.
city manager is creating an employment agreement with the department heads.
With the city itself, not necessarily the individual person, but just city of St. Helens would have an employment agreement with the department head.
Right.
You can do that. I think that that's, again, I'm happy to go and get more information as far as, I think it's really helpful to see what other cities are doing, especially if it's working well for them. And I did push on that question. I have to think about who it was with, but they said that in some of the other cities of your same size, that there weren't employment agreements with department heads, but there were with police and fire. But that's
And
definitely
again,
just
we
open
get
for
to
discussion.
choose.
And you get to choose, yeah,
Yeah,
and
so-
then just hear what makes sense, and you also don't have that many departments, so it's not. Yes, so that's for contracts, I think. I wasn't necessarily prepared to talk about that extensively, but just to share that City of St. Helens is one of the only cities that I'm aware of that does not have a contract with their city administrator.
I'm also not sure if we're doing exit interviews or not. And if so, if we're not, then it seems like we should be doing them. And that should be also part of a review process, is like, you know, when we're looking at attrition and we're looking at why people are leaving. I haven't gotten an answer yet if we're doing them. I haven't seen a form yet or a standard process, but that's something that we should be considering as well, as why are people leaving the city? Do you know, Kathy?
We don't do them.
Right, that's what I thought.
Once in a while, a department head will meet with somebody, but it's not written down as far as I know.
And that's something, if we had an HR representative, it's not, I mean, Kathy does, so I don't even know how she does, honestly, all the stuff that she does here, quite honestly. She's just a rock star back there. But that's something that we should be, in my opinion, considering as well, is why are people leaving the positions?
And I think, and there's two things. One thing, I don't know if it's in your personnel policy to do exit interviews, but even if it is, right, you need the resources to do it. And you also need the willingness on the part of the person leaving to do it, which they may or may not be interested in, but to the extent they are, then that's it. At least you have someone asking that question.
I don't mind the exit interviews, but I experience, if you haven't figured it out by then, and I told you, and you're still, and I'm leaving, then there's an issue. I mean, it's a broader issue than that, so, but I participate in one, sure, and say everything I would normally said anyway, and nobody listened to, so.
And sometimes exit interviews can be like surveys that go to your phone, and there's different forms that people, but usually it's, feedback about what went wrong. I think, but what it boils down to really is that we can do all this research about what to do, but if we don't have the plan in place to be able to implement it, there's no point. We can't execute it. We don't have the HR resources that it takes to really do this the right way. Need an HR person who's designated just to handle HR stuff. Employment, updates. I'm sure John probably does a lot of this. It's kind of fallen on probably multiple roles in the city, is my understanding. Everyone does a little bit of different things like updating job descriptions and stuff. Those are all things that someone designated to HR would be handling.
It seems like if we had an HR/risk manager, that would be.
Maybe even just trying to get a part-time employee just to get us going, get something started. I don't know, employees are expensive. It's the biggest expense in the city. We all know that.
It's the last time we've had somebody specifically dedicated to HR.
Never.
Yeah,
I was gonna say never.
think ever, yeah.
Remember?
It could be, if-
John and I and or the designated ones.
We have some outside resources as far as Lane Council of Governments to send job descriptions for updating and, you know, legal reviews and things.
Companies that could contract to do that, that wouldn't have to be a full-time employee.
There are some companies that do that. Yeah.
The nice part about having a human resource, actual trained individuals, they also do initial investigations on the job site but in here, like it would be for the city, they are actually trained on how to do those initial investigations. So if we have a place where people, you know, can go to that like are concerned or have complaints or whatever it is, it's a safe place for them to go and they can initiate those investigations and then escalate as needed, but we don't have any of that. So we really don't have anybody or any of the rank and file members throughout this city to go to.
I'm thinking just along the lines of Counselor Gunderson is that you could also kind of piecemeal that if there are priorities, if annual review is a priority to hire a contractor to help you with that while you put your budgets together and to evaluate kind of a limited job description on someone to do the annual review plus one other HR function. I think that right, if you have too many functions in that HR person's role, they, you know, you just have to see what your resources are and limit their scope to the highest priority HR functions.
If we were to contract with somebody like that, we could identify those needs without having to piece it all together when we hire somebody.
Yeah, I think with research. Possible contracts and what those might look like as far as cost and timing. Handle performance reviews, whatever those end up being. Right, Ashley?
I mean, and I don't know where you are in your budget process, but
Fairly early, yeah.
really early, so maybe there is an opportunity to carve out some budget for this priority at this time. And then, you know, implement it in the highest priority form. For the upcoming.
Taking note, okay, perfect.
I think we need to take a serious look at it because this is where a lot of liability lies. Right, it is in employees and this whole minutia. So I think that we should take a hard look at that. And also that will keep everything, you know, on the rails, like, you know, systematic. That's what HR professionals do. They make sure that all of these things are done in a timely manner and to conclusion. We don't have that. And that's also a lot to put on, you know, Kathy. She's got enough to do. And now we start adding that. That's not fair to her either. So, and having an HR would be much more efficient. And again, and if we found somebody that had risk management credentials, that would also help with our emergency emergency planning and all of those other things. They can also help with ensuring the training is all done and all the things that are supposed to be done that are liability risk for the city.
Well, and then just helping plan some of the city employee barbecues, things that we do. You know, other staff spend a lot of time doing and they don't even get to appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly.
So things like that, which, you know, in a bigger business, that's how HR works. So I think it would be definitely worth a discussion during budget cycle about how we might be able to start implementing that.
Subcontractor, would you want to go for hiring?
Seems like if we can carve out a position, it seems like there would be enough work, right, on a like consistent basis for them to be doing. And, you know, if we ended up getting one and for whatever reason didn't seem like we need one, I mean, I could always eliminate that position. But right now, I mean, it looks like we have, you know, some serious issues that have been overlooked for a period of time, and we have an opportunity to try to correct them and like limit our risk. It's interesting too, because I have this, I'm tied with all of the Oregon Mayors Association. So it's an amazing opportunity for this collaborative process, right? That you can ask questions and best practices. And so it's interesting to see different perspectives on this, like a lot of the governing rules. It's been conversations among other things, but it's funny because I think generally speaking, they don't, the council doesn't, the ones that don't have the ability to have a say in who they're hiring, they wish they did. That's even Scappoose. They don't have that. And I've heard from council members that they wish they had that. So I do go back to the fact, I like the fact that it be confirmed by city council.
You're speaking to departments only or in general?
What?
Are you speaking about department heads only or in general?
No, department head, not all staff.
Right.
Like, that's not. It is.
I would leave. I'm like, I don't have enough time for this.
Department heads. Department.
We don't have a whole lot.
We have fantastic tenure here. Yeah. There's some turnover, for people moving on or it just doesn't work out. But by and large, you've got a great staff that's fully dedicated and really committed to the city.
Feeling good about this document, or are there things that we're not comfortable with?
Well, Mayor just noted what she's not comfortable with.
Aspect, what do you mean?
I mean, I'm fine with the city administrator selects department head for hire. I'm fine with that and be confirmed by city council. I think that that's important to not give up that. I think that that's perfectly fine.
Oh, okay.
The department heads hire direct employees. That's a no brainer. I don't think that we should be hiring employees. That's the department head. I don't think we should be involved in any termination or disciplinary action. I mean, me personally, I don't want to be a part of any of that. I know how that goes. I participate in unlawful employment suit claims often, and they go on for years. And I just don't think that we have really any need for that. So I don't really have any issues with anything on that's recommended or the recommendation.
I think the only thing left in question then really is that performance evaluations and how should we word that?
In terms of how much detail to put into the document.
Knowing that we want to, potentially look at different ways to separate it out down the road.
I think that from this document, if these big picture categories are something that looks agreeable to city council, mayor and city council, then the next step would be to take the governing policy and update it. And I can look and see if there are examples of how cities create specificity in either their charters or their these types of governing policy documents to create more specificity, or identify where that specificity exists. Is it in the personnel policies? Is it in just a separate resolution that says, here's how city councils do that? I think that it sounds like there's an interest by city council in wanting, more attention to the types of evaluations. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that that's a definite. I think that.
I mean, on one hand, I think, this council is kind of ceding authority to the city administrator to do these things. And now they're kind of wanting at least a little bit of oversight into it. And so I think,
Well, we haven't been doing it, so it's a non-existent thing. So like, it's not like we're trying to like get anything back. It's not been done. We haven't been doing evaluations. So
Right,
we're
so-
actually establishing it.
the track record is what, right, you're saying. We want some oversight to just at least provide guidance to make sure that it's done, and the details of how it's being done. So I guess I'll take a look and make some
The
recommendations.
only other thing that I have is to bring up for discussion is on the council liaison and city administrator evaluates department head.
Mhm.
Like, I really feel like we should consider that council, like, we had already talked about the fact of all of us participating with all the different department heads, right? There's the liaison, but it also puts somebody in like a little bit more of a tough spot, right? Where you have the entire council. If they're coming in front of us, that we have the information, let's say hypothetically, this decided like the 360 evaluation. We have been interacting with them. It doesn't leave just one council. It's the entire governing body here that is participating, whether it's the library, whether it's public works. It puts us all in the know instead of these independent silos of things that are happening. So
So the one thing that I'm thinking there, and I don't know what what does it mean, council liaison and city administrator evaluate department head? I think maybe, and we should talk about that, the point of it is that there is involvement. The council liaison is kept abreast of the evaluation. But that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the council liaison is even is the only person that evaluates that department head. I just feel like there's collaboration. I think what the intent is that there's collaboration, but when that performance evaluation is conducted, part of the evaluation could be sending to city council to say, do you have a review of this department head's presentations to the city council? There could be criteria that the city council is asked. And again, I'm not involved in performance reviews, but it seems like the city council could still be involved in providing feedback about a department head. This designation doesn't mean that other people outside of the council liaison and city administrator are providing the feedback. And obviously, you know that because staff would be providing feedback also.
So this is, I guess, in my mind's eye of how I was envisioning this, is that the city administrator would be conducting a evaluation that was set forth with the criteria that's identified, right? 360, whatever the case is. And then that information comes to council, and we can also then participate in the evaluation with the department head, right? Because I think it's important that we all know what's going on with a department head, not a specific individual that's having to carry the burden. We all can see like what the evaluation is for the 360, where any opportunities to improve are, the things that they're doing great to celebrate that. When we have just a liaison, that's like, we're not connected as a governing body to really understand what's going on in the city with our department heads.
You have some liaisons that aren't appointed to a department head. So for example, if somebody's appointed to the planning commission, they're not a liaison with the department head. So you have others that are and some that aren't. So I like the idea of having everybody involved, however that looks.
I agree with that too. And it's not always a negative thing either, like you were saying. I mean, it would be a time for the department heads to come to us and say, at one point say, hey, this is, if you like this, I'd like to move forward too, but I need this.
I guess and I don't know the answer to this, but wouldn't envision that the council liaison is making the decision on the evaluation. They are just supporting the city administrator.
Right, they're coming in for a review. John does the review on, let's say, Muhammad, right? And then the totality of it, the entire information, then that's brought to council so that we all are on the same page. We're all learning, what this evaluation was. Muhammad, I'm just using him
Right,
for
sure.
example, he can be there as well so that it could be a discussion about, how he's doing. But John would do the initial evaluation. I don't
So
know
you're
why
talking about an in-person evaluation of the,
information that was collected. John would do an evaluation, let's say on Muhammad, right? That information would, based on the criteria defined in what an evaluation is, that whole package would come in front of council with the department head. John can present, whatever the evaluation is, but we all kind of know at the same, like, what's going on with the department head.
What about it?
Necessarily know if we need like an in-person, like a whole thing. I think maybe just like sending the evaluations to the
Yeah,
council,
that would be.
letting us review them if there's issues. I don't know if we
I
need to make
agree.
such a-
I agree with that, but there's also evaluations are a very positive thing. Like, especially if they're doing great things or whatever the case is. So there's that human element is also the time and attention that you're spending in front of somebody that, you know, you're showing that they're valued. You're talking to them. You can say, I appreciate all your effort, whatever the case is. That's their time for that.
They're doing site visits though, where they're presenting to the council, 3 times a year on their department. I just wonder if it's overkill.
To me, it almost seems like 2 evaluations. I feel like I would be comfortable with John conducting an evaluation and then we see it and see the results and the good and the bad and.
Review it, and then we could always have them come in and we
That's
could do
true.
it that way.
We could do it that way as well.
Okay.
We're hoping that they're all gonna be good.
Well, not every evaluation is good, but that's the part about evaluation is continuous improvement, right?
So the way it would work best for me is just like we spoke about. First of all, take a council meetings on. whoever Just comes to John and then to the council. We'll review it and then we can meet. It doesn't have to be a big presentation, but we can meet. And I guess we have to do it publicly. Because the public meeting laws, we wouldn't.
So what are you,
Executive session topics, right? Performance evaluation?
performance evaluations of the city
Yeah.
administrator?
Yeah, you can do it at yes.
So then the evaluate gets completed. We see the evaluation, we schedule a time to review the evaluation with the employee number. They're good. And that's when the dialogue can open up between council, John, and the employee, both ways, all 3 ways, essentially. That makes perfect sense to me.
So just, and building on that, I think that was what building that, in that case, this council is not involved and the city council liaison or council liaison is not involved in actually completing the evaluation or
Correct.
having input. It's just that you then get notice of the evaluation and then can have a discussion about it.
Cause I feel like that's like almost like us doing an evaluation is almost like us participating in disciplinary action and stuff. So that gets mixed cringy. So it would be John doing the evaluation and bringing information to us. I feel like that keeps us out of the employment issues.
Now, the one thing a council can do, I think, is that's define what the evaluation is based on.
Correct.
The the review, the performance
Yeah.
part of the reviews. Are they doing A, B, C, I mean, I don't know what that looks like, but that makes the most sense to me.
Does that make sense to you, John? Just you doing the evaluation?
I think it does, and I think the communication piece could be as simple as distribution.
Yeah.
By email for you to review, and if you have concerns, you can get a hold of me.
So with that, I would take council liaison
Yeah.
out of it, which
Yeah.
I like that. I think we were trying to change, we were just being selective of how many recommendations to make. but that
Yeah.
makes more sense.
So leave council in it though.
No, oh,
Council would be like, down to the initial.
It's not one
we
person.
Come to the entire council for review and then discussion with.
I think it's the way that it's written in here. The council and city will evaluate.
Same page. I think it's matter semantics.
Yeah.
I'm
it's
not sure.
No, I don't think you guys
so.
are,
I
yeah.
think what I heard was John does the evaluation, completes it, sends it to city council
Yes.
for
Yes.
as notice and
Review.
information. It's for review, but it's not, that's a completed evaluation and it couldn't be opened back up by a council question. And so from that perspective, you're
Just
It's
reviewing
not-
it.
Yes.
council would not be involved in the performance evaluation.
No, that's, so I was.
So that doesn't need to be worded in the governing body though?
It could be something like city
I'm just saying, it's
administrator
not worded.
evaluates department head and submits a completed evaluation to city
Yeah.
council.
Yeah,
You wanted to
that
make
makes
sure
sense.
that, that you've received the notice.
I think the council with John involved or whoever's involved in setting the criteria for the evaluation. That's our hand in it.
Yeah, that's exactly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think, again, just the fact that when we start doing evaluations on people, that we can then, if it comes up and rears its head, like they get terminated, we're back in the square one with the unlawful employment suit risk. Yeah, Counselor Hubbard, you've been quiet.
Well, it's
So I just
a lot of moving parts to this.
think so. Really don't. It's pretty straightforward. No, am I wrong?
It's pretty.
I think you're in the clouds, Mark. Okay,
The
though.
way I feel today, yeah.
It's
probably.
okay.
And we
That would
all,
be Unusual.
do we all agree annually? Annually seems appropriate to me.
Any more would be too.
I think annually seems fine, but again, I just want to echo that I really think that we should be hearing from, regular employees about their supervisors as well, not just supervisors about employees.
Yeah.
So I really think we need to find a way to reword that so that we're,
360 can be used for that, and it just.
I know. but she doesn't want us to do like a specific type of evaluation that we're gonna do, but I really think that, we need to have an emphasis on that because
We can, I can specify it in the personnel policy on what that actual evaluation criterion is, which could be a department deep 360, but then it has to also, we have to be mindful about how we collect the information, who it goes to, so that, again, like my conversation earlier with Tamara, so.
I think what I would do is just take that suggestion and make recommendation with some proposed language about how city council retains authority to designate the type of performance review. And that can be updated easily. Like maybe there's a resolution that says, here are the city's kind of performance reviews depending on the different department head or depending on the level of employment. And then if those don't work, you update it and you can change it.
Just review that as well,
Yeah.
right? And we say, okay, yeah, we need this in here, we don't need this, or however. And then there's always, with the reviews, there's always the open dialogue box, right? Like, what would you like to see?
Yeah.
And we leave that in.
And I do agree with Council President Chilton, like the best way to understand if there's a systemic issue going on is with like a department deep. There just really is. There, you get a better indication. If you're just doing like supervisors, you're never gonna get that. It's just not gonna happen. So,
My work, it's wherever. It's the person doing the review who chooses to send those there, and they send them out to community members. They send them out to, like in my case, they send them
Yeah.
out to lots of different places to get a different feel for what's going on, how other people do, not just the department itself. I think that's reasonable.
yeah, we may see that grow.
Yeah, it's important too. I just don't think it's necessary for this document. Like I see this as the what, not necessarily the how.
Right.
So
But I just think that the definitions on the left are really hanging me up.
so what would you propose? Like what?
Well, I think what Ashley was just saying, she made a really good statement that was kind of like, brings it back to a little bit more of a right terms.
But also what is not in the document now is specifying that council will determine, the city evaluation, criteria.
Right.
And so that could be added because what you are doing is you are delegating your authority to the city administrator to perform these evaluations, but you are retaining what Councillor Gunderson said is the right to determine what those evaluations look like.
Really, for the evaluations, the criteria for the discussion between John, it doesn't have to be like, we don't have to set that. I mean, we may not always know what those criteria are supposed to look like.
Say that again?
Well, for the evaluations, like if John comes up and say, I don't know, I'm throwing this number out, but say there's 5 areas that you want to evaluate somebody. John can always set those areas or work with Kathy to set those areas up and then come kind of run it by us and say, is this what you're looking for? Yes or no? And then we can make adjustments with that, like tweak it as we need to.
The specific information that would be asked in the 360.
And I don't have an
Yeah.
example. I
That's
just
what
say
he's
it goes
talking
to the
about.
park.
Yeah.
Let's choose from Mahoney.
What type of questions do you want in this?
Yeah, and we're talking about, like, how successful has been this project. I'm just trying, I don't know how to quantify it. But it could be specific to tasks that are at hand or that have been.
Right, there could be a structure, an overall structure that's approved on by city council for here are the things that we want to be evaluated, but there could be some specific examples or specific questions specific to a certain year
Yes.
that change from year to year.
There might be some consistencies year to year, like 3 areas, say.
Right, how much attrition was there?
Right, something like that. But then specific to like the water fund development, or specific to police retention, employee retention, or specific to, I don't know. It just doesn't seem.
There's a lot of templates out there that have already been thought through.
Yeah.
There is, there
A lot
is.
more than we.
Chat
have ever
GPT.
Other cities, I'm sure, have plenty of resources that we could.
It's already there, I'm sure. I just don't know what that looks like as a non-HR person.
So then that's the next question, right? Is how do we get to that? We're gonna need to be moving towards that. So what does that look like? Those action items to get there? If we don't have an HR employee, then
When is your scheduled presentation with Tamara Russell?
The 23rd.
24th,
Of March?
Who's all
That's really
attending
coming
that?
up.
I'm attending.
everybody,
Supervisors,
every supervisor and every council member.
that wants to.
So maybe one option would be for, I could reach out to Tamara and talk to her about this conversation and about how there is a desire to standardize an annual review process for different categories of employees and what she recommends and how cities have done this in a standardized way. And so she can come prepared. I don't know if that's not necessarily part of her presentation to everybody, including employees, but we can put that on the agenda to talk about again in a work session. So that then moving forward, you can implement that standardized process.
Oh, one thing before I forgot too, that she did mention was the fact that we have to make it very clear to employees that the 360 review is going to outside of the city to attorney. So she did state that as well, that we want to be very mindful of that so that people actually participate.
And typically on those 360 reviews, they're set up to, like, the response goes to one, like if you go turn rates, right?
Yep.
So there wouldn't even be like you're typing something's, it would be the same.
Yep.
Right? So
How does something like that work? Is it an expectation that you will complete this, or is it optional? You can complete this if you want. What's the norm?
it's always been optional as far as I'm concerned. I've seen.
I don't know. I mean,
I think maybe there should,
I don't think you can.
And I think people that if they have something to say, it might be seen as negative. This would be a good way for them to, not that, let's use constructive.
Yeah.
This is a good way for them to act. And let somebody else see it that's up, above their supervisor. I think that's fair.
I'm sure there's a best practice around that.
Yeah, there
That
probably
will-
is.
That I
All
can bring to the
these HR
table.
things.
I'm not gonna, but I think and Tamara can speak to that. I'll put that in my question to her for what the best practice is, but I imagine.
So in this scenario where an employee is not doing well, and we're working with them and doing evaluations and performance reviews and work plans, this annually, I would say it's a minimum of an annual. Sure. We're not gonna be greater than a year.
Okay.
You're saying in case there is some.
Nope, it
special
just
issue.
says annually,
Yeah.
you can only do one.
Oh.
in case he wants to do like some type of an intervention
Yeah.
for an at-risk employee.
We're
and
gonna
use
check
that as a
back
tool.
in 60 days or 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's already something in place. I'm assuming there's already something in place. If there's an employee that's not doing what needs to be done, or that there's, there's a verbal warning, there's a written warning, there's all that in place now? No?
Come on, Mark. We just
We
don't.
need HR. This is what I've been saying. I said we need HR.
I'm not, I
You're
just.
used to a full HR department. We don't have, it's a department though. We don't even have one. We have John and Kathy, and John's a million other things he's doing.
And Kathy, a million other.
Yes.
Well, what's the answer to I guess the answer to the question is no.
It's already in place, is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
we have the
If there's a
collective
corrective
bargaining
action
agreements,
plan
we
needs to
have.
happen, it happens. It doesn't wait for a year.
Does the personnel policy, which state talk about evaluations at all, or is it silent to evaluations?
That's language about evaluations.
Do we actually, I went through that binder. Do we actually have a personnel policy? Cause I don't recall ever seeing one as I sit here today. Kathy would know.
Do you stick the personnel policies in the binder?
I'd have to look.
Went through that page by page and highlighted and tabbed, so I don't remember seeing that thing. I just wonder if we actually.
There's always sticky notes.
There was.
It's under my Harry Potter closet in my house.
It's on the website if you want to. Add to it.
Do we actually have one?
Yes, it's in there,
When is the last time that has been looked at?
2021. And we did an update with CIS. It just hasn't gotten to the point of being able to be reviewed and brought to the council.
See, that's what I'm saying, Kathy. If we had HR, they could help and have to be buried in that stuff.
And I was just gonna say, I highly suggest that not waiting until we do the budget and decide if you're gonna have an HR manager / risk manager, is contract with an HR firm that can help us between now and the point when you guys decide.
That was gonna be my suggestion as well.
Develop the whole.
I would love to do that. I'm just concerned about financials. I mean, this time last year, we were talking about laying employees off. where are we at?
Uh,
So we need to know that before we can take on any more bills.
There's no harm in investigating what. it would-
No, yeah, totally. I mean, I'm definitely open to investigating and implementing it as quickly as possible. All for it. Just want to make sure we can afford it.
The way to do this effectively is contracting with outside firm that can help us build what we need to have in place when we do decide to hire somebody, because I think it's a tall ask to ask somebody to come in and say, here you go, develop it. I just don't think that's gonna be realistic. And I'm not sure how many people would want to take that on. I'm sure they're out there. It's HR people, you never know.
It makes sense to just to identify your priorities
Sure.
in the HR realm, and if that's evaluations or whatever it is, and then contract for those priorities. And that would be, could be more cost effective than an employee. Never know.
It's the maintenance of it though, too. It's not just setting it up, it's the maintenance, it's all,
Performing, doing it.
we could put all these things in place, but if we don't execute them on a basis, then it's a problem.
John, do you feel comfortable with gathering that info for us? Maybe coming back? I
Yeah,
seen you already put it on
I
your
have some
list.
leads on HR firms that do that.
Okay.
Work. And you know, as well as the forms and the industry practices, there's tons of examples out there.
Yeah.
Just getting one that's right for our organization. It's enough, but not too much.
Here on the screen, I think is part of our problem. All cities will receive periodic performance reviews, periodic every decade.
Every 9 years or so. 8 years.
Well, it says
Second paragraph.
second paragraph. It has some more timelines, aspirational.
And just so everybody knows, not that it matters, but I have a list of when people's reviews are coming due. And every month, at the beginning of the month, I send that supervisor a list of the names of the people who are coming up for a review that month.
Are they happening or no?
Some of them do, some of them don't. And it's
Some people get reviews and some people don't.
Do we have standard criterion for the reviews themselves? Like, is it a standard?
standard form.
And that goes on to the department head if they haven't done the reviews of their employees.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's all.
Another way to measure. That comes back to that.
I have 13 direct reports. So that's why I struggle to do that.
Yeah.
Does this all make
Like we
sense to
had
you,
HR.
John?
If we had an HR.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. Yes, I think it's a really good solution for the city, just overall.
Yes.
Liability, I mean, just making sure things are getting done, taking some things off Kathy's plates.
Yes. I agree.
Don't say that I don't communicate with everybody frequently. I just,
But if it's not in writing.
It's a formal process that
Right,
takes
agreed.
time and you have other things going on and yeah, just, it makes sense to do this.
I think we have too many tasks. We can't focus. our
So,
energy.
so if if we actually got an HR manager, in here, so if he has 13 direct reports, then we would change this policy, so he wouldn't necessarily have to be doing that for all of those employees. We'd have an HR manager that was able to do
Well, I'm
that.
sure the HR manager would have something to say about how we update this policy too.
Well, and I think-
Again, their own professional in their own
Yeah.
trade.
And I think also though, the HR manager maybe has a coordination function versus an actual making a decision function.
Right,
And so I think it
exactly.
could be retained where the city administrator is still the one that's evaluating and completing the evaluations, but the HR manager is helping with the.
Facilitate
legwork.
'em.
Yeah, facilitate.
She's knocking on John's door and scheduling appointments with John to get things done, you know?
Um,
Yes.
So as far as next steps, I think what I heard is, and this could be a time to also have any other changes, but that generally the legal recommendations are generally acceptable. For performance evaluations, it's being changed to the city administrator evaluates department heads. And then there's an additional category or provision that the city council determines the city evaluation criteria in some way. But then otherwise, this is generally acceptable. That could be drafted into a document for review
The only other thing was John brought up the annually, there probably should be different verbiage there.
For minimum,
Yeah.
minimum,
Correct.
just for department employees or for department heads also? I guess it could be for all.
I think it's all,
for
everyone.
Yeah. Okay, and then what I also heard was to get some recommendations on kind of standardize, get some recommendations either from the League of Oregon Cities or CIS, Tamara Russell, on how cities, whether cities have standardized performance evaluation criteria and what those look like, and for especially for a city the size of St. Helens, and how those are adopted, you know, by the city council, you know, what that policy looks like.
Would be interested, Ashley, you mentioned Aiken Blitz has come up with some bullet points too, if there's anything that's glaringly different than this, or if there's. If anybody else is interested, but if there's things we haven't thought of that maybe he did, I feel comfortable with this. I like that it brings us closer to best practice and what everybody else is doing, but it's also flexible enough that if council in 2 years wants to tweak it and do something a little different, that they could still do that without having to do a major revision.
I can also ask the other mayors what they're using for their evaluations as well.
That sounds good. So I can talk to Aiken and we can harmonize our recommendations and see if there's any discrepancies. I think off the cuff, what I think was that in his proposal, he did not have city council confirming the city administrator's department head selection. He just had the city administrator making that.
That's not a surprise, so.
And so that's one. And I think the other one is that he would not have had a council liaison involved in the city administrator's evaluation of department heads, which we've just now removed that anyway. So those are the two that I identified that were different. That being said, I can check with him and he can maybe send an email to council also, or we can figure out.
I'm
a way
not
to
really
communicate
interested in
with
what
him.
he has to say personally.
I think since there's been a request for that information, I can try to bring that forward.
Majority. I'm one voice, so if anybody else is interested,
I'm not really interested in seeing it, but I understand your reasoning for it. I just personally think that having multiple attorneys in it just muddies the water, in my opinion. So I would think it should just be diverted to the city attorney, but that's just my perspective. And I think you're more than, welcome to look at other information. That's your, ability to do that. 100%. That's just how I feel.
Sounds like he's already done the legwork, so. Feel like the least we could do is look at it.
I'm unsure why that happened, but
I don't know why he would be working on it. I don't think we directed him as council to work on it.
I think that I will. I guess as a best practice for me, I want to find out what, if there is any information there that's useful to provide that information to you. I think the two things I said were the things that I noticed. But what I hear loud and clear is that this is generally something to move forward on and present a updated governing policy that for your review, for discussion and approval.
I think if there's something else to look at, we should look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I just personally, I don't think, I agree with Jessica. When we start mixing and adding several attorneys and, he focuses on a specific department, that's what he focuses on. And, this is a governing policy that goes across the city. And quite honestly, I just have, I don't trust him and I don't have any faith in anything he's done right now. So I personally am not interested in anything he has to do and I don't want to have any part of it.
Well, what he's done, but
Well,
however, whatever the council wants to do. I mean, I'd fine looking
I
at it
agree with,
or not.
I agree with you as well, whatever.
I think you should have the right to look at documents if you want to see them, Mark.
Exactly.
If you want to see the
Can't
document,
imagine
look at it.
there's something in there that's like,
Yeah, so just look at what he did. It's not, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't,
You can look at it, Brandon can look at it, Russ can look at it, anyone can look at it. I will then, I think if nobody has an objection, I can send, or I can send just if there are any distinctions, I can send maybe what you put together, or if there's any, and I can highlight if there's anything different. Okay,
That's fine.
if that works. Good, Ashley, thank you. Okay.
I think you've done a great job on this, Ashley. Also, you and Peter have done a great job on putting this together.
I don't have any issue. I think it's great too. Fine.
I like how you did it in two different columns like this. It makes it a lot easier. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. I'm glad that it seems like it was a productive discussion, which is.
Yeah.
That's the most important. And I think we've got some next steps. And any other thoughts? To consider?
I think so. Anybody else? Last call?